by that circumstance, you lose your job, you blame it on the Polish plumber, or you blame it on the Asian family who've just taken over the local post office. It'd be very, very easy in that situation to see a proliferation of right-wing instincts. I mean, again, reading about the crisis in Hungary, I think the Financial Times wrote a horrific, or maybe the Guardian, a horrific story of youth on motorbikes with very, very right-wing ideas descending upon the parliament to push across. They hate the crisis. Who do they blame? They blame the historic people you blame in Hungary, which is the Jews, the Gypsies, and so on and so forth. The other possibility is for people to begin to understand. For the left, there's two openings in this situation. The first is an ideological offensive. I think in a sense, we've been on the defensive for the last 20 or 30 years. Sometimes not wanting to use words like capitalism, let's use words like neoliberalism, corporate governance, and so on and so forth. Not because we're cowards, but because you're trying to argue with people who are a long way from you. Suddenly the question of capitalism is on the agenda and people are talking about capitalism. It's incredible. Socialist Workers' Party, we get phone calls from local radio stations. Karl Marx is back. Will you come on the radio and defend Marx? I did so on Radio Luton this morning. Not very well, I think. But that is what's happening. But the second thing which is happening is people, and as you're a Marxist, you go and think it's wonderful, isn't it? Laugh watching capitalism in crisis. The other side is the damage done to working class people requires the left to take up the defence of working class living standards. And let's be clear, the package put for the government is not a defence of working class living standards. The simple fact that Northern Rock carried through proportionally twice as many repossessions as the other banks indicates what the nationalisation is for. A little thing, perhaps to make people laugh. I mean, my partner's a Northern Rock mortgage holder. The interest rate went down by 0.5% for everyone, apart from if you had a mortgage in Northern Rock, it went down by 0.515%. That is, where you have the nationalisation, they're taxing people to pay for the nationalisation already in reality. We have to be absolutely clear on that. There's lots of people on the left who think, oh, it's nationalisation, we should support it, and so on and so forth. We have to learn the long tradition that nationalisation, without control from below, does not represent some sort of step towards socialism. It may clarify the picture in terms of who's, a clear divide in society between those at the top and those at the bottom, but it doesn't mean those at the bottom will control those at the top. Therefore, for us, these are central means. And that means putting our money where our mouth is, being involved on the defensive line, being at the centre of the campaigns against repossessions, the centre of the campaigns against fuel poverty, the centre of the campaign against the attempt to hold wages in the public sector below the rate of inflation, and not just for 1 year, but the next 2 or 3 years, and holding the line in the face of lots of people who say, oh, it's a recession, therefore people won't struggle. It's said by people who've never read any history of previous recessions, some of the most bitter struggles have taken place during periods of recession. But it's a question of holding the line and saying, if the working class people do not fight back now, they will be crucified again and again in the years ahead. And in that process, then we have to rate intermediate things. It's easy to say capitalism has failed. We can present a wonderful picture of how to replace it. It's easy. No one in their right mind would design a system based upon the parcel and parcel of subprime mortgages from one banker to another and assume it can keep going forever. But it's easy to that. It's a bit more difficult to be on the defensive. What we have to be able to do is be able to talk to people and make the connection between the minimal defensive struggles that are going to take place and the maximal thing. And that does raise the question of genuine nationalisation, not just of one or two banks, not parts of the banks, the whole banking system, of replacing the banking system that exists at the moment by a rational means of distributing. Banks arose as a way of distributing the surpluses made in some industry in order to provide investment in other industries. That's where they arose from. And we have to say, in a rational way, you wouldn't have a bank, you wouldn't organise that in the way you had at the moment. It means, for me, raising the centre in the question of the nationalisation of the energy industry, because I don't see, it's not merely that the energy industry is going to cause thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of old people to freeze to death this winter in Britain. It's also, you can't talk about dealing with the greenhouse effect of climate change without talking about taking public control from below of the energy industry. It means raising those sort of demands. In a moment, for me, these are very much when we raise them against propaganda we dance. We don't have a force at the moment organised on the ground capable of pushing to achieve these demands. Although I think it's possible, you began to see the potentiality of something like that in Argentina in 2001, 2002. You begin to see the potentiality of people begin to move, and when they move, fighting to defend themselves, they see the need to go forward. We have to do those things. The last thing we have to do is we have to be assertive, upright, and I say we have to be there on the fighting line. It's not just a question of talking in meetings like this. It's a question of understanding. We need a network of socialists right across the working class, in every factory, in every office, in every university, and so forth, who are going prepared to stand up to take the initiative in doing this, which is, well, I'm part of that, one of those networks, the Socialist Workers' Party, and that's the way I see things. But I end by saying this, in order to carry any of the arguments, you have to understand what's taking place, and that's why meetings like this are important, the pamphlets are important, the literature is important, and so forth. We have to clarify our minds, but clarify our minds not in abstraction, but because we're going into battle, and the battle may be very, very nasty indeed.